This is your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 234 with guest Laura Powers.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode. I am so glad that you are here and excited because Laura Powers is back on the show. She was on a little while back. Her other episode link will be in the show notes for you. And she and I were talking and we started talking about the inner critic. And I love that she has a little bit of a different take on it than I do. And as you know, I feel like inner critic work, negative self-talk is foundational for your personal development, for your growth. And I always love it when people can come on and give a little bit of a different perspective. So you have a plethora of tools to be able to manage that negative self-talk. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Laura if you don't know her in just a minute here. But we are in the launch party period of our Patreon party. I'm kind of unofficially calling it YKAL Patreon party. And for those of you that don't know what it is, what I have decided is that I am going to cease doing any outside advertising or sponsorships like I have been doing in the past to help with production costs of the show. I'm moving things over to Patreon. And what that means is that you can pledge the show for as little as $1 an episode. And there are perks depending on which, there are 3 tiers. There's only 3. I wanted to make it really simple, but depending on which tier you choose, there are special perks and bonuses. So for instance, there is receiving the weekly podcast a day early, opportunity to submit your questions to be answered on listener Q&A episodes, which I am going to start doing regularly once a quarter. You'll be the first to know about future guests and have an opportunity to submit your questions to them, as well as submit questions to me for topics that you want me to do on the show. There's bonus content. And right now, during this launch period, if you sign up before June 30th, 2018, there's extras. We're going to do a video Zoom chat that's typically for people that do the $4 per episode a month. But this time around, it's going to be for everybody. You're also going to get the 7-Day Courage Challenge for free as a bonus, the Self-Love Revolution, just like hours and hours of bonus content that I have created for you that I'm going to give to you for free if you sign up before June 30th of this year. If you miss that, if you're listening to this late and you miss that, there's still a lot of perks and bonuses depending on which level you choose. So simply head on over to patreon.com/YKAL. That link, of course, is in the show notes. I'm really excited to do this Ask Me Anything call. I have no idea how it's gonna go. I hope you have questions for me. You really can ask me anything. I will do my best to have my dog on with me. I know a lot of you follow me on Instagram and watch my Instagram stories with my dog, Giselle. She's our German short hair pointer. And it's going to be fun. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about having a place where the show can be supported and you are involved in it. The show will still always be free, but this is a way to help production costs because it does, it adds up over the months. And I just hope that you love it. And it's a way for me to interact with you and get your suggestions and things like that. The other thing that we have going on is in the middle of July, I am opening up applications for the mentorship. The mentorship is a way to work with me in a small group setting that both incorporates the work of the Daring Way, which as of now, I've only done that over the last few years privately, one-on-one with clients. And then I've rolled out these retreats. And I know that sometimes either it's out of your budget to work with me privately, or you can't travel to do the retreat. And so I wanted to incorporate a way for people to get support and do this work. So it's a virtual Daring Way retreat, meaning you just need an internet connection and some privacy to be able to do that, as well as 3 months of support afterwards in a mentorship setting. And it's also a mastermind setting where one of my kind of superpowers is creating circles of women that are incredible. And it's like-minded spirits, like-minded hearts, all there for the same thing and supporting one another. There's so much power when women get together and witness each other and feel less alone and learn from each other. That's what I have created for the mentorship. Again, it's all virtual and 3 months of support. So much more for me to tell you, but if you want first access to an application and just to read about it when I open up the page that has all the details, head over to yourkickasslife.com/mentorship and you will see a page where you just enter your name and email address. Doesn't obligate you to sign up or anything like that. It just means that you will be the first to know because this is only open to 12 women and we start beginning of October. As I said before, Laura Powers is back on the show. So excited to introduce you to her. If you are brand new to her, not sure who she is, let me tell you a little bit about her before I jump into this conversation. Laura Powers is a celebrity psychic who has been featured by Buzzfeed, NBC, ABC, all the BCs, Fox, CBS, Motherboard Magazine by Vice, and many other media outlets. She is currently in pre-production for a new television series about her work. She is a clairvoyant, psychic medium, writer, actress, model, producer, and speaker. Ever since she was a child, Laura has been seen and sensed ghosts and spirits, and she has learned how to manage those experiences using this ability to connect with the angelic and other realms. She now uses her experience communicating with angels, spirits, and other energy beings to help her clients better understand and change their lives. So without further ado, here is Laura. Laura Powers, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me back.
It's your second time on, and I really want to call you, even though this isn't you, I want to call you like the in-house psychic.
Sure. Yeah, happy to be that.
I want to just be able to tell people, let me consult my psychic on that. Her name is Laura.
I love it. Yeah, there's a television show where I'm their supernatural advisor.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, speaking of television shows, I'm sure everyone in the world except me knew about this one particular show that I didn't know about. So we don't have cable. So, people ask us about stuff and we're like, I don't know. We just stream from Netflix and Hulu and I never knew about the Long Island medium.
Oh, right.
Do you know her? I'm assuming you know her because
I do. But if you're a psychic, you have to at least have heard about her, just because people talk.
I was blown away and we saw it when we were on vacation and it was a really cold day where we didn't want to go outside. And so we watched a marathon of that and Fixer Upper, which I had also never seen before, which I felt like I was the last person. But anyway, it made me think of you. And I just love how psychics are so nonchalant about things because it's, it's just normal life for you, but for everybody else, we get all excited. So speaking of, and of course I had you on before and you and I started, and oh, by the way, everybody, that link is in the show notes. I would love for you to go over and listen to the first episode where Laura was on, but then you had me on your show and we started talking about the inner critic, a negative self-talk, because that's what I had written about in my book. And we got to talking about it. And then that's where I was like, okay, I need to have you on because you have an interesting view of the inner critic that from what I remember, I don't think I had ever kind of heard that angle. So take it away, my dear, and tell us what your view on that is.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, I just want to share my thoughts on thoughts in general, because, of course, when we have inner critic thoughts, it's a type of thought. So my view as a psychic is that our thoughts are actually a combination of a lot of different things. Our thoughts are, partly ours, what we think and feel, but they can also be a combination of things we're receiving externally, messages from our angels and spirit guides. We can be hearing other people's thoughts. We can also be hearing thoughts or messages from what I call dark entities or beings that are not of the light. I think of them as like energy parasites that feed on and create various negative energies like fear, anxiety, stress, even pain sometimes, so insecurity. And when you think of thoughts in that way, one of the things about the physical world is it's very clear what you're saying versus what someone else is saying. Like when you're having a conversation with someone, you don't take ownership of what that person says.
Right.
But in terms of our thoughts, we tend to assume that whatever we quote unquote think is ours, when in my experience, that is the farthest thing from the truth. So if you think about it that way, and there's all this information that's coming in through our thoughts, then know that a lot of times the inner critic is actually external. It's not us. And it's almost like we're engaging in a conversation with someone negative.
That is so interesting. Okay. So I like to, make it known that, I don't know. What I say over here on this podcast is not the gospel. Please, everyone know that. And I know that most people, you guys know. I love to hear other opinions about things. And okay, so an example, here's how I might see something. So if somebody is at work and they have a work meeting and they had dropped the ball on a project or something, and they get a little reprimanded at work. Laura, this was due on Friday. It's now Wednesday. This client is super upset about it. What happened? And then you walk away from that meeting, telling yourself things like, I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. How could I have messed that up? I know better. So what is, like, to me, that's like our old messaging about not being enough. Maybe it's like family of origin messaging, or like that's just, to me, black and white, like beating yourself up, quote unquote. So what do you think about that?
I think there may be a small percentage that is actually being generated from the person themselves. But in my experience, most of those messages are coming externally. And you'll see an example where there's a person who is a very loving person, and they would never think like horrible things or be so judgmental about another person. Mm-hmm. But that energy is directed towards themselves through their thoughts all the time. So if that's the case, if you're generally a very loving person, ask yourself, would I actually think that even towards myself? Mm-hmm. Because in a lot of cases, the answer is no. And sometimes it's an easy thing for these entities to get these messages in. Let's say if we've had very critical parents or someone in our life that was very negative, they can kind of swoop in, and so that we really do feel like it's coming from ourselves. So in my case, I'm very telepathic. So I actually hear different tones of, voices in a way. But it still took many years. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I kind of figured this out and had this light bulb moment. So I would think, when you're having thoughts, kind of check in. Does this feel like mine? Does this feel like my tone? In my case, I had a couple of examples where the tone was so different from what I felt like was my own that I knew that wasn't mine. Like I was walking down the street and heard quote unquote thoughts that were like cursing and racial epithets. And I was like, oh, wait, that's not me. I don't really like things like that. And I was able to have that separation. And then that got me to start really kind of analyzing, the thoughts and paying attention, kind of checking in, is this mine? Just you can mentally ask yourself, wait, is this mine? And if you're not sure, you could maybe approach it, and try to get clarification. But in some cases, right away, you'll get like, no, that's not coming from me. And there's several different people that have written about this, and they use their terminology, which is actually the same as what I use. So one of the types of entities that does this is called a gremlin, and psychically they actually look like, the gremlin from the Gremlins movie, if you're familiar with that. But Amy Poehler wrote a book where she talked about her inner gremlin. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly, what it is. So people can use different terminologies, but essentially if there's a negative kind of thought that's very critical and gets you to feel bad, it's very possible that that's not coming from you.
And part of why I wanted you to talk about this is because I always want to give people like a plethora of tools. Like if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, try to find another one, because I never, like whatever works for you. But it's interesting. So I have a product that is, I call it Kick Your Gremlin's Ass, and it's very tongue in cheek. And it's just really a bunch of different tools to learn to manage your inner critic, and I think we're in agreement. Like, I don't believe you can completely get rid of those thoughts, but you can learn to, like you were saying, recognize them and learn to manage them and see what's yours and see what's not. But one of the exercises is to personify it and look at it as if it is a different entity of your own. And that's helpful to some people. So it sounds like we're on the same page.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So whether you do it that way as a tactic or whether you actually believe that these are separate beings like I do, either way, it's, what's effective is the most important thing. And I would encourage people to, if you have that separation, I think it is a little bit easier to handle it and to not, because if it's you, then it's like, people get into this negative cycle, like, oh, they have a negative thought about themselves and they're like, why am I thinking bad about myself? And it can get into
and then they feel bad about that
downward spiral. Yeah. And another important tool that I use is to call on angels to help clear those thoughts, as well as any being that's associated with those negative thoughts. And Archangel Michael is a really powerful angel. So if there's only one angel that you work on, I recommend asking Archangel Michael. And it's very simple. It's, all you have to do is basically mentally ask for Michael to protect your thoughts and take anything away that's not of the light or not helpful for you.
Okay. So I have something to tell you. I always love talking to you. I get so excited. So my mom, which it was, looking back on it, it was it's weird, but when I was a little kid, it wasn't weird. But my mom grew up very strict Catholic. And then it was probably late 70s, early 80s. I was a little kid. She got into tarot. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was just like really popular then. And she said, it was just for fun. It wasn't like she, was like opening up shop in our living room or anything, but she did it with her friends, but she was into it. Like she had this scarf that she laid out and she didn't have a crystal ball or anything, but her and her friends would do tarot readings. And I remember people coming over to get readings and her friends and neighbors and stuff. And so out of the blue, this was recently, I think after my dad died and we were going through old stuff. And I was like, do you still have your old tarot deck? And my mom does not keep anything. She gets rid of everything, and things that are heartbreaking to me, my mom has gotten rid of. She had it. She still had it. So I just got it last week. She handed it to me in this like tin box, and it's 2 different tarot decks, nice. 2 different books that were published decades ago, like your guide to tarot, and the scarf that she used to light. I don't know if that's like just something she did or what, but I took her bigger deck and shuffled it and cut the deck and pulled a card, and it was Archangel Michael.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
And I'm looking through all of the cards, and some of them I would not have wanted to draw.
Right. Yeah, tarot is definitely, there's a lot going on in there.
But yeah, I love it because it's part of my history, and my mom has held these cards for so long and had read so many people's, and it's just for fun. I had somebody message me on Instagram when I posted about tarot who was very, very concerned about my soul. But you guys, just for fun. So it's okay. I'm going to be okay. But okay. I have so many questions, of course, now around the inner critic. So here's the advice that I tell people when they start to, because again, the first step is recognizing that these thoughts are happening, because we can go down that rabbit hole and not even know that we're down this negative self-talk hole. And my advice to people, and again, do what works for you. My advice for people is, I don't find that it's helpful to kind of fight fire with fire. In other words, I don't think that it's helpful to talk back to your inner critic. A lot of people like get super empowered at first and they're like, I'm going to use the mantra of telling my inner critic to fuck off. And I always say, like, you've been speaking to yourself this way for a long time. You can put down the boxing gloves for a minute and take a step back. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think generally engagement is not helpful. It's like if you're dealing with the toxic person, in many cases, the best thing is just to completely withdraw, right? It's just like any engagement, that person is getting energy from you, energy and attention. Because a lot of times that's all they want, internet, I guess. Exactly, is energy and attention. So if you just completely disengage, I find that that's the best thing. And then in terms of like clearing, Archangel Michael, that's what he's the best at is protection and clearing. Mm-hmm. He's known as kind of like the warrior. And so he's great. He has the tools to help, sort of combat and handle that kind of energy. So, and by the way, if you're hearing this message, it's likely that it's meant for you, and the angels will use many different methods to connect and reach out to people. So if that is a card that you drew and now I'm telling you about Michael, I think that's deeply meaningful. And another reason that I would say that is important for you in particular is when you do work that is helping other people sort of battle their inner demons or entities or inner critics or whatever you want to call it, you are going to have an onslaught of like, not only are you dealing with your negative inner critic, but you then are also being exposed to maybe those people's inner critic that you're helping. So that's something that became clear to me as I did more and more of this work. And as it got more and more visible, I have to have really strong boundaries. I have to really have really strong resources and tools to manage it, because the amount of sort of attention that's coming towards me from some of these beings is very strong.
Interesting. Oh my gosh, interesting. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, because and this is a topic I don't think I've ever talked about on the podcast in all 200 and something episodes, and maybe just in passing, but Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
It's the thing that gets
which we're in now, by the way.
Right. As we're recording this, we are in it right now, but it might be something that my listeners maybe have never heard of. I'm sure if they live in the world of self-help, they've at least heard it, but they don't know what it is. So can you tell us, what does that mean exactly? And how can it affect technology and the world around us? Do you believe in it? Give us the goods on that.
Sure. So Mercury in retrograde is, of course, an astrological term, and it has to do with the planet Mercury and how it appears from the Earth's perspective in the sky. So there's 3 times a year, typically, when from the Earth's perspective, Mercury will appear to go backwards in the sky. And what that means from a practical perspective is that Mercury's influence is not as strong. Mercury influences technology, transportation, and communication. So anything that is affected by those things will be kind of negatively, or impacted, or if you don't want to use the term negative, at least will have a less of an impact. So that's a time when people will often have, problems with technology, glitches, things crash, traveling delays, flights will be canceled or delayed, or, traffic accidents or just bad traffic. And then interpersonal communication challenges. So in terms of that, I absolutely believe in it. I put it on my calendar. I note it. I get the dates for the whole year and I put it on my calendar so that I know
I have
that
some colleagues that do that.
Oh yeah, it's so helpful. And then in preparing for Mercury in retrograde, what I try to do is make sure that things are kind of wrapped up. Big important things are taken care of before I get into that. Mercury in retrograde, while it can be challenging, is actually a great time to sort of wrap up loose ends. Organize your closet.
Go on vacation, but don't get on an airplane.
You can't travel. Just know that you kind of go with the flow if you have delays and things like that. It's a great time for wrapping up old stuff. So like right now I'm, kind of editing and working on stuff that I'm gonna launch, but I'm not ready to. It's the Mercury in retrograde. I would caution people to not make any major commitments during Mercury in retrograde or sign contracts. It's only 3 weeks. So, 3 weeks, most people can just wait a little while. And the reason is things are just not as they will be when you're not in Mercury in retrograde. And I've heard many, many stories of people making a commitment, signing a contract, or even deciding something big, to work on a project or something. And then after Mercury in retrograde passes, it just doesn't click. It's not aligned. They have problems. It ends up falling apart. So that's what I would caution people against doing, is making big decisions, and then just spend this time to kind of slow down, assess things and finish up old projects.
That's so interesting, because I've heard some people say, get irritated with people who use that as an excuse. Somebody will drop the ball and they'll be like, well, Mercury's in retrograde, so... And then I've heard some people say, if you believe in it, then it'll screw up your life. But if you don't believe in it, then you're free and clear. So who knows? But
I think it's complicated. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think it's important not to get wrapped up in oh my gosh, everything falls apart during Mercury retrograde. Of course. I mean, that's not a good, mindset. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize different energies that are at play. So in my case, I still will travel. But I had two, major delays on my last trip that I just got back from that was during Mercury in retrograde. My first flight was delayed 3 hours and my second flight was delayed 4 hours due to mechanical issues. And I was prepared that this might happen. I had brought extra snacks and reading materials, and it's like, it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. I have a funny story too about travel, because I just traveled and it was during Mercury retrograde. I didn't know at the time. And I brought my 2 children to go and see my mom, and it was a hard flight anyway. It was 3 flights. We were going from North Carolina to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it was 3 flights and with 2 3-hour layovers. And our third flight, and we had been traveling since 8:30 that morning. It was 8:00 at night and we were so tired. The third flight was delayed, and a guy sitting at our gate waiting threw up all over the carpet, like 20 feet away from us. Poor guy. It was like a grown man too. It's like, how embarrassing. And so that was gross. We were in Denver, and then continued to throw up. So we finally fly from Denver to Santa Fe, and it's a tiny airport for anybody who's ever been there. Literally one gate, like one terminal. And I'm standing outside on the phone with my mom, and she's like, "We're here. We're right out in front." And, the airline, and we had the airline right, and I did not see them. And I'm explaining what everything looked like. It was so late. My kids are like falling asleep, standing up. So after like 15 minutes of this, I finally am like, "Mom, let's start from the beginning. Are you at the Santa Fe, New Mexico airport?" And she goes, "No, I'm at the Albuquerque airport."
Oh my gosh. And that's like an hour or something away.
An hour away.
Oh my god.
And I was like, oh my God. If you knew my mom, like that's not surprising that would happen, because she's a little bit blasé with communication sometimes. So, but it's funny when you said communication, I was like, oh my God. I almost cried.
The thing about travel that is kind of the trifecta for Mercury in retrograde in terms of possible problems is that, there's often a lot of communication involved in travel. You're literally traveling. And then there's, the technology aspect, which in current time, there's a lot of technology involved in flying or traveling of most types. So it's not surprising that there would be problems with traveling in particular during Mercury in retrograde, because it's like all 3 areas can be deeply impacted.
I mean, now I can laugh about it, but I was not laughing at the time. But we did finally
Same thing on my way out to Washington, D.C., where it was going. It was not just that the flight was delayed, but it wasn't delayed until we got to the airport. So had to, spend a lot of time at the airport. And then we actually boarded the plane before they learned about the mechanical problems. So we were on the tarmac for like 2 hours.
Oh my God. That's never happened to me. I know it happens a lot, but I've had to get on and off the same plane twice before during a snowstorm in Utah. That was pretty brutal. But that you definitely could learn a lot about yourself and other people when it's like that, because I was like, it was my first book had come out, and I was going to my one and only book signing in San Diego. And I had to get there, and I really was impressed with myself, because I was like, what am I going to do about it? There's nothing I can do. Me getting pissed off about it is not going to help. And there were a couple people who were really throwing fits, and that was interesting to watch and get curious about.
Yeah. Well, when you look at this from the sort of negative energy perspective, the way that I see the world with different entities and everything, a lot of times there's entities that are feeding on that anger, frustration, again, like a parasite that they eat that kind of energy, and they will push whatever button will get that. So, if they know that, she gets frustrated by things out of her control or whatever, they will push that button over and over again. So it's kind of like with a bully, if you just stop reacting, a lot of times that action will really get minimized.
They'll go away. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just feels a lot better too on my end, but
sure.
Okay. Again, I'm all excited. Like so many questions. I'm going to, of course, have to have you on again. Our in-house psychic, Laura Powers, is here, everybody.
I'd love to.
Okay. So let's talk about sleep. And you talk about the healing power of sleep, and how does sleep heal, and what are some ways to get a more restful sleep? I think I have a lot of people listening who I know struggle with insomnia and anxiety and tend to struggle with sleep. So help us, please.
Okay, well, sleep is so complicated and it's super, super important, both spiritually and physically. And I think that they're connected. I believe that, the physical and the energetic spiritual are completely tied together. So when I went on my sort of spiritual opening and awakening and started accessing my psychic abilities and connecting with angels, I also went on this, healing journey physically and detoxed and cleaned up my diet. And I think they went hand in hand. So sleep is important spiritually because it's when we connect with our higher self. It's when we also connect with our angels and spirit guides. So we literally, kind of go over to the other side and, get information, messages, and support and strategize, for how to move forward with everything that's happened in the day before. And then on a physical level, that's when our immune system recharges and replenishes itself. And it's when our cells rebuild. And so it's really important in multiple different ways. And there's lots of studies that show that sleep deprivation has some pretty serious impacts. And in fact, for those who aren't aware, one of the recent areas of research has to do with showing that Alzheimer's actually is at least somewhat influenced by lack of sleep on a chronic basis. So it's, when we don't get enough sleep, our brain literally starts to clear away neurons. So this is obviously not something that we want. And that said, I know it's a struggle for people. And in fact, when I was in my toxic marriage at the very end and right before my sort of spiritual awakening, I was on sleeping pills. I couldn't sleep. I had really bad insomnia. So when we're not sleeping, I think we want to look at, why is it that we're not sleeping? In my case, I think my soul, and my body was like, wake up, wake up. There's something really bad going on here. So it may be that there's something that your unconscious mind is trying to sort of tell you about your life, something that's off. In my case, that, it was my marriage I really needed to take a look at. And then other aspects that were connected with that. It could be that you are having, some amino acids or, something that's off chemically in your brain, which might connect with your diet, or maybe that you're just have adrenal fatigue and you're kind of stressed and on all the time and your body needs to learn how to decompress. One physical tool that's amazing that I've been learning more about is amino acids and how they can impact our sleep. So maybe you're short on a particular type of amino acid that doesn't even allow your brain to kind of go into that mellow sleep time. So I think approaching it in a lot of different ways is helpful. Check in, is there something that maybe I need to look at that it's not aligned with me in my life? Okay, look at the amino acid and the diet thing, and then also working on it from a spiritual perspective. I highly recommend for people to, again, call on Archangel Michael and ask for him to protect your thoughts and your dreams while you sleep. Because when we go to sleep, it's when or even just nighttime, it's when we're the most psychically open so that we can connect with our angels and spirit guides and our higher self. And if we're not learning to protect the space, that might be when we get a lot of sort of chatter. So from my perspective, it's like entities that are talking with us or, whatever's there. But we can say like, nope, I want this protected. I only want to connect with light beings. And since our angels honor our free will, we do need to ask specifically for things in order for them to step in and intervene.
That's so interesting. Okay. I
realized that was a lot of information at once.
Well, and I think like the takeaway for people is probably if you think it might be something you might want to go, I would advise going to see a naturopath. I think nothing against regular general practitioners, but they're just going to do like a regular CBT, and
yeah,
I know there's a lot of nurses out there and I think they're all really great, but I think both are good. Regular medical doctor and a naturopath. They just do different blood tests and they look for different things that might be happening. But what was interesting is when you said, what you were saying in the beginning about how when we sleep and dream, we are connected to this other world. I had never really put those two together. I guess never really put too much into dreams, except it was just our brain's way of processing and healing things. And what's kind of interesting is what I thought of when you said that was my husband has very, very rarely ever remembered a dream. And from what I understand about dreams, people that say, I didn't dream last night, you do dream, you just don't remember them when you're awake.
Yeah.
So when we did I have mixed feelings about it, but I've talked about it before, so I'll just say it. He and I did a Whole30 together. So it's basically where you cut out all the crap. And like, to be fair, like our diet isn't terrible. Like his diet wasn't terrible to begin with, but there was some stuff. And because he has arthritis in his hands and he thought that might help. He started dreaming and remembering dreams every single night. And was like astounded by it. And he would like wake up and be like the first thing he would tell me, like, oh my God, I had this dream last night. And he was so excited about it. And I was like, I wonder if there's a connection to the fact.
Absolutely.
And then now that we're not, that he's brought back in the coffee mate and all of those things, doesn't remember his dreams anymore. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, there's a huge connection between our ability to connect psychically, spiritually, and, the foods and things that we put in our bodies. So when I went through my sort of psychic and spiritual awakening, I completely changed my diet. So I no longer eat grains or gluten or dairy or caffeine or sugar. So those are some big ones. And there's a huge difference. And this is important, not just in terms of dreams. Obviously, dreams can be very helpful and they're very interesting, but in terms of being able to just access your own intuition and sort of inner guidance, that many of these different substances, they kind of like create, I guess, psychic or intuitive congestion. You can look at it that way. It's kind of like, it's just, you can't breathe, just like you can't breathe clearly when you're congested, you can't see or sense clearly when you are congested spiritually. And physically.
That's interesting. I have mixed feelings about people messing with their diets and things like that. It's a whole nother story, Laura. I did a 2-part thing about diet culture, which again, whole other conversation. But I do think that for some people, there are certain foods. I mean, my son is gluten intolerant. He's not allergic, but he was diagnosed with autism when he was 5, and we took gluten out of his diet and it changed our lives. So I do think for some people, it's a real thing, whether it's dairy or processed foods or gluten or caffeine or whatever. But I've always been somebody, no matter what my diet looks like, I remember my dreams. I have completely vivid dreams. I have reoccurring dreams, some that don't make sense, but then end up making sense, and just bizarre. I've learned to just live with it, and it's pretty weird though sometimes. I think we've talked about this on my last episode. I've had visits from my dad, and then I've also had just dreams about him, which now I know what the difference is.
Yeah. There's many different types of dreams. And one type, since we were talking in the beginning about, our inner critic and gremlins and that sort of thing, is there can be what I call entity dreams. And these are very triggering dreams. They could be nightmares on the strong end, where they're just basically designed to kind of elicit a strong negative emotional reaction. And it's interesting because as I've gotten sort of stronger and more protected in my spiritual life, the dreams have shifted. So an entity dream when I was, several years ago might have been literally like babies being murdered, like horrible, and now
I've had horrible dreams like that too before.
Yeah. And now it's like literally, oh, I don't like my hair.
Right. I'm late for school.
It's something exactly. And so, I mean, that's been really fascinating to watch. And it's like, even when I have a triggered dream like that, and I'm able to look at it and then even kind of make that trigger less strong than it used to be. But if you're having those dreams or wake up really what I call triggered, really, emotionally responding, maybe in a negative mindset, I just think it can't hurt to ask, Archangel Michael and the angels to clear anything that's doing that. And then, of course, when you go to sleep, ask for your dreams to be protected.
I've heard of people doing that before. That's something that I've never done. I have actually asked to not have dreams because I've woken up before and felt like my dreams were so busy that I was tired in the morning because of that.
Well, considering the nighttime and even the in-between sleep and dream state time. So a lot of times people, they go to lay down and they're not even asleep and it's like, la, 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 all these ideas and things coming in. It's a time when, we're open and we're able to receive psychic and thought messages. And so sometimes that's when they come in, I will sometimes go to bed and then I'll get channeled something that I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get up and I have to write this down because I know it'll disappear. But I have said to sometimes hey, guys, I need to just rest. So yeah, people can do that. But the other thing I'd say is if that happens, it may be that you don't have enough time in your daytime life, in your regular life, for these messages to come in. So that's when meditation is important. And if you find structured meditation different, even just having some quiet time, go for a walk, even just maybe do the dishes, but don't listen to something or watch something, something where your hands are busy, your mind is not actively super engaged with what you're doing, but it allows for some openness and some space for you to receive messages from your angels and spirit guides.
Okay. That's actually funny because that's the advice that I give to some of my clients sometimes who are constantly like listening to podcasts or, they have something going on all the time and feel discomfort in the stillness. So
and one thing I'd like to say about that discomfort is just like with our thoughts, we feel not just what we feel, especially if you're empathic. And an empath is someone who feels energy from outside their body in their body. And there's some people like myself, I'm extremely empathic. I would say, that before I started to learn some tools, 80% of what I felt wasn't mine. Like it was really strong. But everyone is at least somewhat empathic. So it's just like a range.
Yeah.
And it's possible that discomfort is not yours.
Interesting.
Just like our thoughts may not all be completely ours, so it is with our feelings. So maybe when you have that stillness, if you do have one of these gremlins, that it is uncomfortable with that silence. It is uncomfortable, and it also may be uncomfortable because you might be providing an opportunity to listen to, say, Archangel Michael or the angels as well.
That's so interesting. I might have told this story the last time you were on here, so forgive me, everybody, if I'm repeating myself. But I consider myself, don't think I'm an extreme empath. I think I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And maybe it's because it's been so uncomfortable for me that I've learned to just completely close it all out. But ever since I was very young, I'm extremely uncomfortable at garage sales and secondhand stores. And it's not because I'm a snob. Yeah. Like, trust me, I like a good deal just as much as the next girl.
Right.
And I always wish that I could go in, and every time I try, I feel like, even just thinking about it, like I put my hands over my face and I'm like, ugh. But there was one time, there's this really great, it's more like a consignment store. I think it's huge. It's like this huge warehouse here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it's called the Red Collection. And I've gotten some really great pieces. There was this one particular time I was in there, and it's sectioned off. They have kind of like showroom style furniture store, but then they have, if you keep going back, there's sections where it's like just end tables and just dining room chairs. And so it was, for some reason, walking down where it was like just like living room end tables, and I got hit with this overwhelming feeling. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I stopped like mid stride. And my thought was, something bad happened here. And it was with some piece of furniture. I don't know which piece it was, but it was something right there. And like my blood ran cold, and it just was the weirdest feeling. And before, I would have been totally freaked out by that and just like kept walking and never gone back there again. And this time I just was like, all right. And kind of said a little prayer for that person or whatever had happened there. I have no idea what it was, but it was a really big step as someone who's an empath to be able to separate like where I stop and the other person begins. And that's new for me, is to have that kind of just being able to manage that.
Great. Yeah, that's wonderful. That first step is the realization, like, oh, not all this is mine, and not taking ownership. So like when I was growing up, I would literally take pain medication for pain that wasn't my pain, and I was feeling everyone's emotions, and it was really challenging. And it's an effective tool to check in when you understand what it is. But when you take ownership of what isn't yours, that's when it's really challenging. And in regards to, that experience that you had, we pick up on energies that are left behind. So everyone is constantly kind of depositing emotional energy in different places. But on top of that, a lot of times with antiques or older belongings, there can literally be earthbound spirits or ghosts kind of still attached to those. So if one of those is there, then it can be really, really strong, because it's not just an energy. There is a person on a spiritual level who's still actively releasing that emotion in that space.
Yeah, it was weird. And that kind of experience used to freak me out so much, and I would really scare me. And it's been helpful. I mean, even just conversations with you that it's okay. It's not mine. And it's a big deal because I want to be able to go to the Goodwill, damn it.
Yeah. And if you want to go to one of those spaces, one of the great things to do is, spiritually, if you allow yourself, ask Archangel Michael and the angels to protect you in your energy field. Another great tool, if that doesn't feel comfortable for you, is to just visualize yourself in white light, which is very protective. And then a third tool, which I have found very effective for when I'm going to space where it just feels really intense energetically, is to visualize yourself in, like, this sounds funny, but like a disco ball, like one of those mirrored balls, like inside it. And it's just, you can just set the intention that only love and light comes in and everything else gets reflected back to, wherever it's come from.
Oh, I love it. Laura Powers, everybody, you can go over to healingpowers.net. That link will be in the show notes, along with the previous episode where I had Laura on, and everything that you need to go and follow her on social media, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you so much for being here again. I've so enjoyed our conversation.
You are most welcome. And if you do find this type of thing interesting, I also have a podcast called Healing Powers Podcast, and Andrea has been on the show twice as well. So you might enjoy those episodes.
We'll throw that in the show notes as well. And As always, everyone, thank you so much for being here. I have so much gratitude for you all for showing up every week and spending your very, very precious time with me. And until next time, I will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.